Here on the ground, change happens fast. Problems feel frequent and urgent. It's loud and anxiety runs high. From a satellite view, the Earth looks the same as it did thousands of years ago. We've been here before. Let's learn from our past and shoot for a better future.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of A Satellite View. I'm Todd Mikkelson, your host, speaking at you from Sunday, September 17th, 2023 in the time and space continuum. This week, Kevin McCarthy, the weakest speaker of the House in the history of the universe, made a declaration. I'm telling the committees in Congress to start an impeachment inquiry. Well, they've been doing this for more than 8 months, and they've got nothing. It's just that now, apparently, they're going to, do it again or keep doing it, except now it's going to be after Kevin McCarthy just made the declaration that it's an impeachment inquiry instead of a congressional investigation. Kevin McCarthy, of course, back in 2019, said that Nancy Pelosi can't just declare an impeachment inquiry. She has to take a vote on the floor to get it passed. Now, he's not doing that. Although he promised to do it 10 or 12 days before he made this announcement, he said, yeah, we're going to have a vote on the House floor. But then in those ensuing 10 or 12 days, he figured out that he couldn't get it passed. He didn't have enough votes on the floor, and he would be making a lot of nervous Republicans who got elected into districts where Biden won in 2020, making them take a vote that could hurt their reelection. So he's not putting a vote on the floor. So basically, he's again going 180 degrees in the opposite direction, completely contradicting himself. Another thing that happened this week, Mitt Romney is coming up in the news. And we're going to talk about both of these guys, Kevin McCarthy and Mitt Romney, and the Republican Party. And I think there are a lot of revelations being made in what Mitt Romney is saying. I also later on want to talk about the absolute BS that the mainstream media is doing against Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I mean, the Republicans are obviously deathly scared of Kamala Harris, but we'll get to that. We're going to do our deep dive here and do a little bit of history first. I'm going to read from The Atlantic. Some Republicans have explicitly framed this new inquiry into impeachment as a response to Trump's impeachment. But the more useful comparison is to the House investigation into Benghazi from 2014 to 2016. Both inquiries are based far more on vibes and political machinations than they are on hard evidence. Kevin McCarthy's long-standing ambition to be Speaker of the House sit at the center of both. And the fate of the Benghazi investigation offers some indications about how this one could turn out. Like the current impeachment inquiry, the Benghazi story began with U.S. involvement in a foreign country, in this case Libya. On September 11th, 2012, Islamist attacks on 2 U.S. facilities in the city of Benghazi killed the U.S. ambassador, a foreign service officer, and 2 CIA contractors. Republicans blamed Hillary Clinton, then Secretary of State, for failing to prevent a response quickly to the attack. Then Speaker of the House, John Boehner, initially resisted calls for a special committee to investigate the attack, but eventually agreed. Because of pressure from what we used to call the Tea Party freaks. So right now we have the MAGAs. This is all on the Republican side. Back then we had the Tea Party freaks. They ended up running Speaker Boehner out of his position and the ensuing speaker after that. So finally, Kevin got his turn, but Kevin was the favorite. The point of the Benghazi committee was to hurt Clinton's chances at winning the presidency in 2016. We know this because Republicans were not subtle. As McCarthy, then the House Majority Leader, said in a September 2015 TV interview, quote, "Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was unbeatable, right? But we put together a Benghazi special committee, a select committee. What are her numbers today? Her numbers are dropping." The frank confession that a congressional inquiry had been used as a tool of partisan warfare helped cost McCarthy the speakership. The same month, John Boehner announced his retirement. That's how heated it got after Benghazi. McCarthy had been the clear favorite to replace him, but amid fallout from the interview, he suddenly dropped out, saying he couldn't unite the caucus. He eventually got the gavel this last January, and we've heard about how hard that was for him. But now he's just a toady for the Moggots. He doesn't have the power of the Speaker of the House. That's why he made a promise that, we're going to have a vote on the House floor to begin impeachment inquiries. And then he couldn't have a vote on the House floor because he didn't have the votes. Now, a big part of Benghazi was the fact that the State Department couldn't get the resources they needed. Reading from another Atlantic article, security at the Benghazi compound was, according to the independent panel commissioned to investigate the attack, grossly inadequate. There were no Marine guards. Security was provided throughout a little-known British firm called Blue Mountain Group, which hired about 20 untrained, inexperienced Libyan men. Quote, "I've never held a gun in my life," one of the men said. At the time of the attack, they were armed only with batons and flashlights. The cost of the security contract for Benghazi, $783,284, amounts to little more than a rounding error. The diplomatic security agent in charge of Libya was repeatedly denied additional security. Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State at the time, waged a losing fight with Congress for embassy security resources over the course of the first Obama administration. Some of the ringleaders of the last week's hearing were among the prominent opponents to that spending, with Representative Chavez, if you remember him, and Representative Darrell Issa joining to cut nearly $500 million from the State Department security accounts that cover armored vehicles, security systems, and guards. In fiscal year 2011, House Republicans cut $120 million from the Obama administration's requests for embassy security funding. In 2012, they cut another $331 million. Issa once personally voted to cut almost 300 diplomatic security positions. So the Republicans trying to cut costs, just like Vivek Ramaswamy, we love to say his name, we love to say the name Ramaswamy. Ramaswamy, who gladly is no longer in the news, he's completely fizzled out, it seems, said he's going to cut, millions of government workers. These people don't know how things work. They just simply don't know how things work. You need to fund things. You need to fund security of our embassies. Now, Mitt Romney played a part in this as well. He was running for president in 2012 against Barack Obama, who the Republicans were trying to blame Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton for the Benghazi attack, when in reality it was caused by an opportunity for Al-Qaeda because we didn't have really any security at the embassy in Benghazi, because Republicans cut it to the bone. Now, there was a very interesting part that Romney played. Romney, of course, wanted to use this for his advantage to win the presidency. He brought it up at a debate between he and Obama, a very famous moment where he didn't have his facts right. You could tell by the look on his face, he was scared that he might have gotten something wrong when he accused Obama of not calling the attack on the embassy a terrorist attack until 2 weeks later. Obama, in fact, called it a terrorist attack the very next day in his first statement about the incident. Somebody on Romney's team just got it wrong. So Barack Obama was like, and then Romney turns back to Obama with a scared look on his face. And then Obama says, "Proceed, Senator," something to that effect. And then the moderator said, "It's true, Obama did call it a terrorist attack the very next day." And then Romney repeated, he didn't. But Romney was dead in the water at that point. Obama just trounced on him. Romney just didn't have what it takes. Romney just doesn't have what it takes to run for president, something like president. He really only has what it takes when he barely has an opposition. That's how he's gotten elected so far. Now, he put out a letter blaming Obama for not calling it a terrorist attack and calling for an investigation in Congress. Congress did start that investigation. They grilled Hillary Clinton live and in person for 11 hours, if you remember, back in 2016, about the Benghazi thing, which happened 4 years earlier. The Republicans were harping on Benghazi for 4 years when they finally realized, okay, people are sick of this. This was a big strikeout for us. Anyway, during that investigation, it was found out that Hillary Clinton used a personal email server. And then that became the whole thing for the rest of 2016, 2015, 2016. Hillary's emails. And that, and yes, collusion with Russia by the Trump campaign helped Hillary to lose. And 20 years of the Republicans beating up on Hillary Clinton. And by the way, she still won the election by 3 million votes. We talked a couple episodes back about the Electoral College. That's a whole nother subject we're not going into right here. But Mitt Romney's letter kind of led a bit to the insaneness that we have now, which includes Trump and the MAGAs. Now, we were on our way there with or without Mitt Romney, but he was willing to play with those people back 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 12 years ago when he was running for president. He wanted to be the big guy. He wanted to be the leader of the party. He had to appease the Tea Party freaks. He had to do things that he didn't think were right. Now he's kind of relenting for that. He's not really apologizing, but he's revealing that, yeah, that's in fact what he did. He had to sell his soul to try and become president. It leads to what he's saying now, 10, 12 years later, I think is a path to how we can bring the dividedness in our country together. By the way, our country isn't divided. It's just got a really loud, small, very minuscule minority that takes up too much of our time and gets way too much attention by the mainstream media because it works well for the mainstream media. They keep repeating, our country is so divided. No, we're not. 90% of our country agrees on things like guns and women's health care, abortion rights, climate change. It's just that the mainstream media props up this minuscule minority and says that they're 50% of America. They're not. They're a minuscule minority. Always remember that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but right now I'm talking about Mitt Romney. It's really, really interesting, the things that he's saying now, that he has announced that he is not running for re-election in 2024. He ran in 2018. He did not run in 2016. The seat he now has wasn't open until 2018. So he was not a part of the Russian money laundering through the Republican Party that went on in 2016. You've heard me say it if you've listened to this show before. I really think Trump is blackmailing Republicans in Congress because they all had money laundered through their campaign. They didn't realize it at the time, but after they were elected, Trump called them one by one into his or the Oval Office, or probably more likely the dining room that it seems like he spent all his time in next to the Oval Office. Said, I just want to inform you that you had a lot of money. Yeah, a lot of money went through your campaign from Russia. Laundered through your campaign. Did you know that? I bet you many people don't know. Many people don't know that you've had, I don't think so, sir. Yeah, we have it on record. We have the paper. And I'm just telling you, if you say anything against me, you're going to be the one that goes to jail for it. Mitt Romney didn't have a campaign in 2016. He's free to talk against Trump and has been for 5-6 years, ever since Trump came down the silly escalator moment, just absolute embarrassing the whole country to the rest of the world. Anyway, so Mitt Romney, what has happened is in 10 years, 12 years maybe, he was sort of the standard bearer. He was sort of the leader. He was their presidential candidate. He wrote a letter. Congress answered it, did what he asked. Now, of course, he lost that campaign in 2012 and went away. And then in 2018, other Republicans were saying, hey, that seat's open in Utah. And Romney weighed the pros and cons. And this is happening in 2017. Romney is like, okay, Trump is obviously failing at the presidency. So I think I'm going to run because I can win. It's Utah, and Utah loves me, and I'm a Mormon, and blah, blah, blah. There's really no opposition, so I stand a chance again. And so he decided he would go into the Senate and maybe help lead some of the Republicans on a path away from Trump. But when he got there, he was not welcomed to do that. And now, 4 or 5 years later, he has given up on the Republican Party. And that's what we're going to talk about when we come back from a short break. You're listening to A Satellite View. I'm Todd Mikkelson. We'll be right back. Satellite View. By the way, if you like the music you hear on this show, go to toddmikkelson.com and push the music link. It'll take you to an awful lot of music that I used to work on when I worked in music. And I'm actually working on some new things as well, but they're not up there yet. We were talking about Mitt Romney. He's saying that he's retiring, partially because he's 76 years old now. He'll be 78 or 9 when he's done with this next term. And if he stayed on, he'd be like 85 or 86 by the time he was done with his next Senate term. So he's saying, I don't want to be in my mid-80s when I retire. Well, okay, they all say that. But then an article came out in The Atlantic. It seems Mitt Romney is having a biography written, and he has a biographer writing it. And the biographer wrote a really long and extremely interesting article, again, in The Atlantic. The Atlantic is really incredible these days. Mitt Romney, he says things like, I've had more than a dozen senators come up to me and say something to the effect of, wow, we're really glad that you're saying the things that we want to say about Trump. And then he says, and then there's a long pause as if they're waiting for me to thank them for saying that. So he said, after a couple times, I came up with an answer. And now when somebody says that to me, I say, there are worse things than losing an election. Take it from somebody who knows. And that's because he says, also senators, when he came back to the Senate, they said, when you're working on a bill, the first question you ask yourself is, will passing this bill get me reelected? They don't consider, will passing this bill help my constituency or the people of the country? It's just all about reelection. He said they're all deathly afraid. Losing an election is death to them, even though it's not, they don't need the money, but they need the relevance and feeling of importance. Mitt Romney just so disappointed in his fellow Republicans. 5 years ago, he thought, hey, I can help my party rebuild and get away from Donald Trump. But now he's completely given up on them. He's all done. I'm all done trying. And he has no more F's to give because the things he's saying in this article are pretty incredible about his colleagues. He said, Mitch McConnell says, you're really lucky to be in a position to say the things that we all want to say. And The Atlantic, by the way, contacted Mitch McConnell's office, and Mitch McConnell said, I don't remember having such a conversation with Senator Romney. Of course you don't. Coward. I'm kind of paging through this. Here's something that Mitt Romney actually, I remember a documentary came out after he lost in 2012, and it was, somebody was following him through the campaign. So there were a lot of candid moments. And I remember watching that going, if he would have acted like this in public, he could have won the presidency. I almost like him in this documentary. Hate him in how he's acting in public. Absolutely disagree with every word he's ever said. If you remember in 2012, he's like, corporations are people, my friend. He was towing the line for the Tea Party. He's done all he can to take from the poor and give to the rich throughout his whole life. He's a Mormon. I'm just saying. Mitt Romney. Yeah. Oh, remember also in 2012? No, the Mexicans will deport themselves. It won't be a problem. What? But behind the scenes, the real Mitt Romney is actually, he wanted to work in 2018 when he got back in the Senate. He wanted to work on climate change. He wanted to work on actually trying to do something constructive about the border crisis. Republicans want the border crisis. They don't want to do anything about it, but Mitt Romney does. The things Mitt Romney is saying in here, there's something really interesting. I mean, this seems like a really intelligent, thoughtful, really good guy. Shortly after moving into his Senate office, Romney had hung a large rectangular map on the wall, first printed in 1931 by Rand McNally. The Histo map, it's called. It attempted to chart the rise and fall of the world's most powerful civilizations through the last 4,000 years of human history. When Romney first acquired the map, he saw it as a curiosity. But after January 6, 2021, he became obsessed with it. He showed the map to visitors, brought it up in conversations and speeches. More than once, he found himself staring at it alone in his office at night. I want to find this map, by the way. The Egyptian Empire had reigned for some 900 years before it was overtaken by the Assyrians, then the Persians, the Romans, the Mongolians, the Turks. Each civilization had its turn and eventually collapsed in on itself. Maybe the falls were inevitable, but what struck Romney most about the map was how thoroughly it was dominated by tyrants of some kind, pharaohs, emperors, kaisers, kings. He said, quote, "A man gets some people around him and begins to oppress and dominate others. It's a testosterone-related phenomenon, perhaps. I don't know, but in the history of the world, that's what happens," unquote. America's experience in self-rule is fighting against human nature, he said. This is a very fragile thing. Authoritarianism is like a gargoyle lurked over the cathedral, ready to pounce. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if the cathedral would hold, the cathedral being the United States. He also says many, he might say most, I can't find the quote right now, but at least many of his Republican colleagues do not believe in the Constitution. They want to have an authoritarianism in this country, and they're fine having Trump be their leader, be their Hitler, so that they can be the Nazis. They can go even further in punishing a woman for trying to get an abortion, even if her pregnancy is threatening her life, even if she's a 10-year-old who was raped and is now pregnant and will probably die if she tries to go through childbirth. They can punish that woman even more, the woman that they're so afraid of. How far will they go? Throw her in jail for life? Maybe the death penalty. That's how it happened in Germany. Relatively quick, but it felt slow, I'm sure, at the time. Just like it is here. The slow cooking, the frog in the slowly boiling water. What if all the Republicans were like Mitt Romney? I would still completely disagree with them. I'd completely disagree with conservatism. But we could work together. Mitt Romney wants to work on climate change. Instead of deny that it exists, that's what the rest of his party's doing. Mitt Romney, I think, is an example of what I talked about in the last couple episodes about how we need to find a way to not hate each other. I'm sick of being so pissed off at these people and hating them. I do feel hate in my heart for some of these people who are obvious hypocrites, Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, what are you guys doing? I can tell you what you're doing is making most of America feel disdain and hate for you, and we're getting sick of it. I don't hate Mitt Romney. I vehemently disagree with his beliefs and his, how he thinks things should go, but we could probably find some compromises that would work to fight things like climate change. Can't do that with Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz has made a complete ass of himself to the whole country. The whole country hates him. Apparently his own family. I don't like to bring that into it, but I mean, how vile do you need to be? And I'm sick of feeling that way about fellow human beings. Yes, so many things I have on my notes again. One thing is the whole Hunter thing is really stirring the Kushner pot. We're actually hearing, I don't know why we didn't do this 2 years ago, but we're actually hearing the Democrats saying, hey, we need to subpoena Jared Kushner and find out what is going on and what happened between him and the Saudis. I think we know, but he needs to go to jail for the rest of his life. And talk of that is coming about. And a part of it is in reaction to what the Republicans are doing, trying to do to Hunter Biden. Of course, David Weiss, he was picked by Donald Trump's administration to do the Hunter Biden investigation. He's been working on it for something like 4 or 5 years. He has nothing, and he announced that a couple months ago, but then he started getting death threats. He had to get a bunch of security. By the way, Mitt Romney spends $5,000 on security for his family because he doesn't go along with Trump. He gets death threats from who? Fellow Republicans. Really, the MAGAs. The minuscule minority of people who only live to hate. And they're not afraid to kill. They're not afraid to go to jail, apparently. Some of them say they're not afraid to die for the cause of doing things like finding Nancy Pelosi's house and beating the crap out of her 80-year-old husband. So yeah, all these people need security. David Weiss is a Republican. He's a conservative Republican. Joe Biden didn't get rid of him purposefully to make it look like he was hands-off on the Hunter Biden investigation. And David Weiss made a deal to have Hunter Biden promise that you're not going to go back on drugs or have a gun again, and we're going to let you go because you didn't pay your taxes for a couple years because you were a mess. Now you have repaid the taxes and you've paid the fines. He had a gun he never loaded or shot. He had it for 11 days before his girlfriend threw it out. He said he got it because he remembered going to shooting ranges with his dead brother. And kind of, it was, I mean, he the poor guy was a mess. He had his mom and his sister die in a car accident, and both he and his brother were in the hospital for months, and then that same brother dies years later. And, Hunter Biden was having trouble coping. Anyway, now he's been indicted, and he's indicted on the gun issue. I thought Republicans didn't want that to happen. This particular thing that he's now being indicted for is something that the Republicans are trying to pass bills to get rid of that particular rule. And then after he is indicted and has to go to trial and maybe even go to prison, now the GOP is saying, oh, well, that's the only indictment that's not tied to Joe Biden. That's why they did it. So it's still not enough for him. And McCarthy, he says, okay, we're going to do an impeachment inquiry. And then they say, well, we're going to kick you out. You can't appease these people. It's dealing with terrorists is what it is. They're never going to compromise. You can't deal with these people. The last thing I'm going to say here, I heard just today on MSNBC, a couple commentators talking about how Joe Biden's numbers are really bad and Kamala Harris's are even worse. And in the meantime, Kamala Harris is doing this college tour, and she's a rock star. She's got thousands and thousands of people coming to see her, and they're cheering. They love her. They're waiting in line for hours to see her speak, which she's really good at. The Republicans depict her as somebody who's just really dumb and just cackles, is what they say. She's just cackling all the time. And the reason they're doing it is because they're scared poopless of her. They saw her perform during the Senate confirmation hearings of people like, what's his name, the beer guy? Brett Kavanaugh, the rapist who likes beer too much. They saw her perform at that confirmation hearing, and they're scared to death of her becoming president. So the mainstream media is saying, why are so many Democrats against Kamala Harris? We're not. We're not. I love Kamala Harris. I wanted her to be the nominee. And then I was very glad that she became the vice presidential nominee along with Joe Biden, because I thought, okay, I'm fine with that. If Joe's got a better chance of beating Trump, then let's bring in Kamala Harris that way. I don't care. I want Kamala Harris to be our next president. What's happening right now with Kamala Harris, her opponents are scared to death because they know how great she would be. And in fact, the people who really know what's going on. People like you listening to this show, just always remember, I remind you, I think every show, the polls have been wrong since Trump rose, even before that, but since Trump rose, the polls have been wrong, and they get more and more wrong. They've been wrong about all of these elections that have been happening over the last few years. All of them. They've been wrong about all of them, and it's because Gen Z is not a part of any of this polling. Gen Z loves Kamala Harris. Gen Z loves Joe Biden because Joe Biden's done more to help Gen Z than any president in the history of the country. And I'm talking about a perpetual Gen Z age of people. Early 20s, Joe Biden is trying to do things to help those people. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are trying to protect women from the MAGAs who are trying to kill women. Go look up Victor Shi. Victor Shi, and his last name is S-H-I. He's a really great and rising leader of Gen Z. See what he says about these things. The polls are wrong because Gen Z is not a part of the polls. And the polls that say things like, 77% of Americans believe in, want a background checks for guns. If Gen Z was a part of that poll, that wouldn't be 77%. It would be 98%. The polls are wrong in all kinds of different ways because they're not polling everybody. They're unable to poll everybody. I don't know why we're paying attention to these polls, and I don't know why these polls are even still being done. They know they're not accurate. And it's been proven that they are wrong time and time again in all of these elections. And they're wrong right now. By the way, another thing, people who know things, Democrats are called bedwetters because Democrats panic over this kind of stuff, especially at this point in a campaign. Because right now, all you're hearing about is the Republicans running for president. And then I hear Democrats say, well, Biden's not even campaigning. No! It would be stupid for him to be campaigning now. Let the Republicans are all making fools of themselves. Why would you interrupt that? And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are doing the kind of campaigning that you do right now. They're going around to America, having little gatherings, doing speeches, talking about all the great things they've been doing. The next thing is going to be a little bit more contrast. The great things we're doing, and the Republicans are doing nothing but trying to do all this political theater and circus. Then Biden's going to have zillions of dollars to start spending on TV ads next spring. And then you just absolutely pummel them. And all you have to say is, Republicans want to ban abortion completely. Even if the woman is going to die, they want to ban abortion. That's all we need. But we've got so much more. So don't be worried by the mainstream. I mean, the mainstream media is so off right now. I think they don't know what to do because things are just so different than they've been. And of course, they're owned by corporations who won't let them actually tell the truth about most things. So be careful where you get your information and don't be scared. We got this. Absolutely. I'm not saying relax and don't vote. We need to stay active because being so active and having Gen Z, that age of voters, be more involved than ever in the history of the country is what's making us win these elections, and it's going to make us win the next elections, including the presidential election of 2024. I've gone way over time. Thank you so much for listening to A Satellite View. I'm going to have to do I'm going to Washington, D.C. next weekend, so I'm going to have to do an early show, probably record it like on Tuesday, so I might miss some of the late week's news next week, but I'm determined to do the recording and get it edited and release it next weekend, even when I'm in Washington, D.C. We'll see how that all goes. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I'll speak at you next week.
You've been listening to A Satellite View with Todd Mikkelson. Go to toddmikkelson.com for links and more information.